risk for everyone, that's obviously a bigger risk for black and brown people. And like, it's happened loads of times when we've been in groups, sitting in a coffee shop, just in the centre of London. It just happens there's a protest going on. You don't even have to be there, you don't even have to be visiting. But because the police appeared to surveil people on the HS2 line, they come and they harass you, they stop and search you. I mean, up at COP in Glasgow, a group of people from the HS2 campaign went and they followed people round when people were having pints in the pub on a night, even though nothing arrestable happened throughout the whole of COP that we were involved in. They still try to arrest people, they still relentlessly stop and search people. I remember one day I was stop and searched 6 times and I had the receipt of every stop and search on me. But they still stop and search us because they think, you know, they say, oh, you're going to do something, but actually they've got no reason to believe that we would do something because most of us have never done anything arrestable outside of the camps. So it's ridiculous, you know, there's no reason for them to police us in the way that they do. I know many black and brown people on the campaign who have never put themselves in an explicitly arrestable role, so they've never went up to say like, you know, I'm going to do this lock-on or I'm going to go in this tunnel, but they've still been arrested and they've still been found guilty of a crime because they've been there. Whereas most white people on the campaign, that doesn't happen to them. You know, if you choose to leave the land, then often you don't get arrested. If you're not on an eviction, then often you don't get arrested. And, you know, not to generalise, that doesn't happen to everyone, but a lot of people actively put themselves in a role to do that and to resist it. But what we're seeing is that black and brown people are not doing this because they don't need to do that to be arrested because it's just happening anyway. And it's becoming more and more apparent to me because when I look at like 2 of the people of colour that I know, one has been in prison and one has been threatened with prison on multiple occasions, and it's disgusting because we don't do any more than anyone else does, but we're being criminalised far more than anyone else. And I've been in other activist spaces and I've not found it as tough or as difficult to deal with. I've been arrested for other things and it's not as tough to deal with because I found that I don't get targeted as much. But when it's on the HS2 campaign, you were targeted much more for being a person of colour, because even in all of the witness statements when they profile people, it is very evidently like racist in the way they profile us, in the way they have security that make profiles. They build profiles of us and they have like WhatsApp group chats where they send photos in and profiles and they build them. And you can see when they're doing that, the profiles on black and brown people are much bigger than they are on everyone else there. It's really tough to deal with, knowing that whatever you do, you could be criminalised for, knowing that you don't even have to go into a compound, you don't have to be trespassing on land, you simply just have to be existing as a no fixed abode person, eating round a campfire, and they can come in and criminalise you. And obviously with the policing bill, we know that this is criminalising the GRT community far more than anyone else. And this is the complete difficulty, because racism against travellers is real too, and this is something that people don't talk about as much. And the HS2 campaign is propped up by the GRT community. We use GRT tactics, we have a heavy presence of the GRT community. They're integral to this fight and this struggle. They're like some of the most incredible people I've met are now facing prison because they simply live in their vans. Because their van is their home, they're facing prison. 3 months in prison and huge fines, and having the van seized too. It's ridiculous. And like, I know that a lot of those people found safety on the HS2 campaign. On land that was more secure because there was more people there, we had an established camp. And they came, and now HS2 is seeking an injunction to criminalise all of us too. Anyone who resists it. So anyone who resists the racism that the workers perpetrate, anyone who resists a wildlife crime, anyone who simply says, stop HS2. You know, some people were on the injunction because they made a Facebook post. Because they made a Facebook post that said HS2 is wrong, and that's the justification they had for trying to fine people tens of thousands of pounds. And you know, it's really, really difficult to deal with, and there's so many people that are still resisting, but the campaign is so much smaller than it used to be because people just can't keep resisting anymore because it's such a difficult situation to be in. And I'm really proud, and I just want to say thank you to everyone that ever did resist HS2 or still does, and particularly the black and brown and working class people on that campaign, because it's so difficult. It's so difficult. I lived there for like quite a long time, non-stop on that campaign, and it was so difficult. It was really difficult. But if I could go back, I would. If I could, I would. But the sad thing is like the last camp that was there is currently being evicted, and it's, you know, whether it's legal or not is still open to interpretation, because personally, after being in many evictions, I can say that not a single one of them has been legal. Denham eviction was not legal, they didn't own the land. Euston eviction wasn't legal, they didn't own the land. Yet Euston eviction, they actually overturned the verdict. So everyone got found not guilty and the case got thrown out, but they actually overturned the verdict for a few people and made them sign undertakings for HS2 to promise to no longer resist it, even though they didn't own that land. And they still don't own it now. They've not done anything with it. A year and a half later, and that land is still not used. The grass has grown back on it. They've cut down some of the trees, but the grass has grown back. And they have it for a temporary taxi rank. But what's temporary about cutting down all of those trees? That was a safe space for loads of homeless people. I now live in the area of Euston, and like, there's no green spaces at all. It's a shit place to live. It's awful. It's terrible. But it was so much better when that camp was there. And the amount of people I speak to on the streets now who say, yeah, my life was much better when that camp was there, because they could go and get food, they could go and have a tent to stay in, they could learn skills, they could learn how to climb. The amount of people who learned how to climb, they could learn how to cook as well. They could help us cook. They took an active role on the camp, and it gave people a purpose. And the HS2 campaign gave me a purpose in a time when I'd been kicked out of education and I didn't know where else to go, and I wanted to follow activism but I didn't know what to do. That campaign gave me a purpose, because you're in a community, and that's the reason they target this campaign so much, is because we do have a good sense of community. It's not perfect, nothing's ever perfect, but that's why they target campaigns that have active resistance camps, because it's a threat, because we build communities, and community is one of the only things that can withstand brutality. If you don't have a community, inevitably change will not ever come. So I'm going to maybe move into a bit of a question and answer, so if anyone has any questions.